But the system we have now has actually broken down, only we haven't quite recognized it. A decline in the value of the dollar is necessary in order to compensate for the fact that the U.S. economy will remain rather weak, will be a drag on the global economy. China will emerge as the motor replacing the U.S. consumer, a decline in the value of the dollar, a managed decline.
That was George Soros, of course, and you know who George Soros is. When we come back, what is the plan exactly? What is he talking about? And how do Mark Carney, yes, and Chrystia Freeland figure into this plan? We'll have more in mere moments. We need political change, but we also need the resolve to resist. Yes, please like this station and subscribe if you want to. Resubscribe if you need to. We appreciate your support in whatever way you can. This is a station that tries to reach out to give you the news you might not hear otherwise, and to provide you with the means to fight back, to resolve, to resist. This is a interesting broadcast. I've never quite felt a sense of trepidation before a broadcast, but it's almost like I'm going over the line today in describing something that we're not supposed to talk about because it's dangerous to do so. And I realized this week when Mark Carney was installed, it came to me what was happening. You've all heard of that organization from the Ian Fleming, James Bond novels, Spectre, as Sean Connery always referred to it, with that Scottish accent. And of course, Spectre replaced SMERSH, which was the Soviet Union's anti-spy organization. It was death to spies, was what it translated to. And of course, as tensions were reduced after the Cuban Missile Crisis, you heard more about Spectre in the James Bond films. Ian Fleming, of course, did not live past 1964, so wrote no more James Bond novels. But Spectre, I think, is ideally suited to describe where we're at today, where ideology for the power brokers means nothing. Far left, far right, communist, fascist, it's all about power. And everything else is a veneer. I had a high school teacher who told me that, probably in grade 12. And that stayed with me perhaps longer than anything I heard in post-secondary education. I never forgot. His name was Roger Rajat, and unfortunately he's passed. We were very close. Very wise man, very sagacious. And what a sense of history. But he told me that, and it's amazing how that has come to fruition. Where ideology ultimately accounts for little but a justification for the pursuit of power. And perhaps Spectre was created unintentionally, but it is emblematic of where we are today. Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland are acolytes of the real Spectre in this world, the World Economic Forum and other globalist entities like the Bilderbergs that seek to empower elites and disenfranchise you, everybody else who's not part of the power of brokers, the elites in this world today. Carney has no clear ideology. While trying to coerce banks and businesses to adopt net zero policies with the United Nations and an NGO called Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, and we'll have more about that later. The firm that he chaired, Brookfield Assets Management, was investing in fossil fuels and pipelines around the world, completely anathema to his net zero policies. So on the left hand, he's pushing net zero. On the right hand, he's buying up fossil fuels, laying down pipelines, and pursuing a completely diametric goal. Why? Because ideology is not the important thing. It's power, what he's after. And this is why he has been installed. The common denominator is power and money. He was installed this week as Canada's 24th Prime Minister to fulfill the plan, which is to annihilate the United States as the last bastion of freedom, and with it, the US dollar as the global currency of choice. We've gone over how Carney has already stated that that's his objective. That was his objective as governor of the Bank of England. And as late as last year, he was still stating he wants the Chinese yuan to replace the US dollar as the global currency of choice. Now, ultimately, Justin Trudeau proved to be too much of an intellectual lightweight and too immature for the World Economic Forum and their disciples to implement the full policy in Canada. So they reached for Mark Carney, a man who has spent his life in globalist circles as a central banker, as the leader of an NGO, working for the United Nations as the goodwill ambassador for climate change. Mark Carney was ideally suited to complete the plan. Justin Trudeau had served his purpose. It was time for Justin to leave. That's why he left when he did. Why do you think? 1 week, he was adamant. I'm going to stay here. I'm young. My father was much older when he left the job. Justin Trudeau insisted, I'm going to stay around. Nobody's going to push me out. A week later, he was pushed out, and it was over. But why do you think Mark Carney's flying to Europe tomorrow? Isn't there a problem on the border? Doesn't he have to deal with a continuing problem with drugs entering Canada and getting past the border to the US? Doesn't he have to deal with Donald Trump? He keeps talking about Donald Trump as being the nemesis of Canada. Donald Trump being a clear and present danger. Donald Trump being this guy who wants to annex Canada. Why isn't he staying around to meet with Donald Trump as his first priority? Why is he going to Europe to meet with European Union countries, potentially interfere in the war in Ukraine, to talk about his carbon tariff, and of course, to bring Canada closer to the European Union and farther away from the United States? That is Mark Carney's goal. Carney is working with the globals to destroy the US currency and Donald Trump. He wants to introduce a digital currency and a more authoritarian central bank, and that's precisely what he's doing. Now, I encourage you all to have a look at this evolving series, the deep dive on Mark Carney. The latest, which will be out today, is an expose on the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. Now, this was Mark Carney's brainchild to force banks and businesses to adopt net zero policies, meaning to stop the consumption of fossil fuels, to go to a green energy plan, stop flying aircraft, stop driving cars, go to electric vehicles. You've heard it all. Donald Trump came to power and he said, forget it. Ain't going to happen. Now, what did the House Judiciary Committee say about GFANZ? Well, he called it a climate cartel, has declared war on the American way of life. The climate cartel is waging a global world war for net zero against disfavored American companies, including those in the fossil fuel, aviation, and farming industry that allow Americans to drive, fly, and eat. That is what Mark Carney was up to. And of course, Mark Carney was also the UN Special Envoy on Climate Action and Finance while he pushed this NGO. GFANZ operated like an umbrella, uniting various sector-specific alliances, Net Zero Management Managers, which was launched in December 2020 and predates GFANZ. For example, Canada is being positioned to lead a proxy war that Canadians do not want to fight. A proxy war in the climate change war. It will tank our economy and impoverish you. And that's what this is all about. And this is what the House Judiciary Committee said. Now, here's an interesting analysis from Terry Newman at the National Post. And what did Carney do the day after his resignation from GFANZ? He officially threw his hat into the Liberal leadership race, hoping to become party leader and Prime Minister of Canada. In other words, his handlers, his globalist handlers said, Mark, it's time to move on to the next plateau. It's time for the next step. You're going to be Prime Minister of Canada now. How? Justin Trudeau is going to resign. There's going to be a leadership race. And the only real competition you're going to have is Chrystia Freeland. We've already told Chrystia she's not going to win. In fact, she's going to be totally obliterated by you. She's going to get very, very low numbers. In fact, 2/3 of the Liberal membership won't be allowed to vote. So we can ensure you win the Liberal leadership contest. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. 2/3 of Liberal members could not vote for Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, Karina Gould, anybody. They were disqualified. So 150,000 Liberals, some of them 14-year-olds, some of them non-citizens, decided who the next Prime Minister of Canada was. And that's how Mark Carney became Prime Minister, through the back door. Now, let's listen for a minute to what George Soros had to say. And guess who is interviewing George Soros in this interview? Think about it. I'll give you a hint.
Question one, follow-up. Hey,
Yes, Chrystia Freeland. Chrystia Freeland interviewed George Soros. And we'll get into more of that in a minute, because Chrystia Freeland was promised the job of finance minister. We'll get to that in a second.
But the system we have now has actually broken down, only we haven't quite recognized it. And so you need to create a new one. And this is the time to do it.
In the United States, how worried are you about the budget deficit and maybe about the possibility of inflation?
Well, certainly a decline in the value of the dollar is necessary in order to compensate for the fact that the U.S. economy will remain rather weak, will be a drag on the global economy. China will emerge as the motor replacing the U.S. consumer. And of course, it's a smaller motor because the Chinese economy is much smaller. So the world economy will have less of a motor. So it will move forward slower than it has in the last 25 years. But China will be the engine driving it forward, and the U.S. will be actually a drag that's being pulled along through a gradual decline in the value of the dollar. So there would be a slow decline in the value of the dollar, a managed decline. And that would be the adjustment that it needs to be accomplished.
All right, so George Soros, and I'll get into George Soros in a minute. But what did he say here? He wants to eliminate the United States as the world economic leader, eliminate the US dollar as the global currency. And that's exactly what Mark Carney has been saying. If you've been watching Stand on Guard all week, I've mentioned this 2 or 3 times now. It's in the Substack. The evidence is there. Jackson Hole Economic Summit 2019. Mark Carney spoke extensively about replacing the US dollar either with the Chinese yuan or what he called a hegemonic or a synthetic hegemonic currency, whatever that, digital currency. Is that what he means? Is that a euphemism for digital currency? You bet it is. That's where Mark Carney is going with this. Now, George Soros, of course, you know all about George Soros. Soros has participated in banking currencies. He has manipulated He made $1 billion off the manipulation of the English pound. He owns a massive empire worth billions of dollars and includes a vast network of non-governmental organizations. Literally made his billions by battling against the British pound. Soros' many activities that he's conducted over the years include getting elected left-wing prosecutors, district attorneys in the United States, all throughout, from San Francisco to New York City. George Soros has spent hundreds of millions of dollars in getting DAs elected who are sympathetic to his ideology, which is allow people to shoplift, get people out easily on bail, get the criminals back on the streets, provide very lenient sentences, defund the police, create chaos on the streets, allow violence to continue. Now, why would a billionaire, multi-billionaire like George Soros want that to happen? He's wealthy. He's extremely wealthy. So why does he want chaos in the streets? Because it helps him destroy the United States. And his empire can replace it. The globalist empire is in the wings, waiting to replace the United States as it falls. Why do you think they hate Donald Trump so much? Why do you think we have created this little war in Canada to hate Trump, to hate the United States, to create this tariff crisis, this trade crisis? Why do you think this is going on? Because George Soros and the globalists want this to go on. And this is because George Soros wants to take power, and he doesn't have an ideology. Is he a communist? Maybe on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Is he a fascist? Tuesday and Thursday and Sunday. Or Saturday, excuse me. Yeah, he's both. He's whatever it takes to consume the power. Now, Justin Trudeau was a pawn in the game. Justin Trudeau was being played. They used him. They used him up. He's gone. But he'll find some place to rest in the globalist empire. Now it's Mark Carney's turn. It's just like Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He has been used up. He followed the plan. Why do you think he's so confused right now about what happened? Why is Donald Trump not saying what he's supposed to say? Where are my handlers? Where are my protectors? He's being turned out into the wilderness, and he will be left to his fate. You can guess what that fate is going to be. I'm not going to say it on air, but you can guess what that fate is going to be. And it's probably imminent. But here's Zelensky talking about, I was just doing my job. Where did you hear that one before?
They'll have to negotiate with me, and I said that I'm exchanging it for NATO membership. And then it means that I fulfilled my mission. There is NATO. It means I've fulfilled my mission.
He has fulfilled his mission, which was what? To bring the world to the brink of nuclear war, to try to destroy Russia, because it's not supposed to be allowed to become democratic, to become more democratic. It must be destroyed. It must be broken up into several states. Is that something to do with the resurrection of the Russian Orthodox Church in Russia? Has that got something to do with it? Because Russia, everybody in the West calling themselves liberals, always apologized for the Soviet Union. It could do no wrong. And we had to be more understanding about communist Russia. We had to be more understanding about the Soviet Union. They were just growing. But Putin is, of course, the Antichrist to these people. And Russia has no hope at all of evolving into a more democratic state. And we have to just break it up, destroy it, hate it. That's the message. And that's the same message for the United States. Destroy the Trump administration, destroy the US dollar. And Chrystia Freeland, She's still in the game. She's still in there swinging. She was in the leadership race against Mark Carney. The only really serious contender, Karina Gould, is a joke. Chrystia Freeland was a cabinet minister for almost 10 years. Foreign Affairs and Finance, the two most important ministries in Canada. Yet she seemed to go crazy during that campaign, didn't she? Some of the things she said were beyond reason.
Is turning predator. And so what Canada needs to do is work closely with our democratic allies, our military allies. I've been foreign minister. I know how to do that. That's why I would start with our Nordic partners, specifically Denmark, which is also being threatened, and our European NATO allies. I would be sure that France and Britain were there, who possess nuclear weapons. And I would be working urgently with those partners to build a closer security relationship that guarantees our security in a time when the United States can be a threat.
All right, so two things to notice here. She wants a closer relationship with the European Union, even though we are on the border with the United States. She sees the United States as a, quote, predator, unquote. She sees the United States as the enemy, to the point where she's willing, apparently, to use nuclear weapons against the United States, even though Canada doesn't own any. She wants Denmark's, she wants the UK's nuclear weapons, or maybe France's nuclear weapons, to threaten the United States with nuclear oblivion. That is absolutely crazy. That's where Chrystia Freeland was talking. Why do you think she was saying that? Because Chrystia Freeland was playing the game. It's part of the plan to demonize the United States so much that they deserve to be nuked. And we have to rely on Keir Starmer, Herr Keir Starmer, the crazy prime minister of Britain who locked people up for saying things he didn't agree with. We have to be in lockstep with Keir Starmer. He's our protector now. Let me tell you, people, the Bank of England is literally maybe a month away from collapse. I've heard this on very good authority. There is an imminent economic collapse in the UK, and Keir Starmer has been very much part of that. Of course, it didn't start with Keir Starmer and his Labour government. The previous Conservative government was just as crazy. It was just as reckless. It was also just as globalist. So they exchanged one globalist government for another when Britain's elected Keir Starmer's Labour government last year. But Keir Starmer, of course, has just gone even crazier than the previous Conservative government. And it is completely mad. Here's a bombshell for you. You all know Naomi Wolf. She's been on my program twice, and she'll be on in the next week or so. She's she's journeying around the world right now. And she's promised when she gets back to the US, she's going to come on my show again. Wonderful woman. Very intelligent woman. Extremely perspicacious about what is happening in terms of the globalists, the elites, and the power brokers who control us all. And that's what Mark Carney is doing. Look at this. Look at this. I'd forgotten she tweeted this. And she mentioned this to me when she was on my program the last time. And I'm going to ask her about this the next time she's on my program, when she's on Stand on Guard in the next couple of weeks. She says, I knew Chrystia Freeland slightly, and I remember that we were both younger journalists in the green room of a network. You know, that's that back room before you go on to in front of the camera. They put you in a green room to sort of sit there and sweat. And they were both checking our makeup in the mirror. And she said smugly that she was about to move to Canada to be tasked to run the economy. Wow. And I thought, what the F? You're a journalist like me. And Chrystia Freeland doesn't have a PhD like Naomi Wolf. I had no reason to believe she had the background. No, of course, Chrystia Freeland didn't have the background. She was a journalist who literally went from a substandard Ukrainian-Canadian publication that often printed positive notices about former members of the Waffen SS getting together, to relatively big-time journalism, and then to the finance minister. She became the finance minister with that kind of background, that kind of experience. Who put her there? Well, Chrystia Freeland says she was about to move to Canada to task the... Who tasks you to run the economy? Obviously, somebody was pulling the strings here. Now, I want you to watch Chrystia Freeland at the swearing-in ceremony. And I'll stop it, and I might not play the whole thing, but this is extremely interesting.
Change to something called Minister of Canadian Culture and Identity, Parks Canada, and Quebec Lieutenant.
Now here's
and Quebec Lieutenant.
Minister of Canadian Culture and Identity, Parks Canada, and the Quebec Lieutenant.
Now here's Stephen Guilbeault, of course, getting his new portfolio as Quebec Lieutenant and the Minister of the Biosphere or something crazy. Named Canadian Culture and Identity Minister. Wait now. Look at Chrystia Freeland. She's literally jumping for joy. She's back there. And a lot of people pointed out when I did the live broadcast, why is Chrystia Freeland so happy? But look at her. She's bouncing around in her seat, looking like she's having looking like she's having the greatest time of her life. She just can't contain herself. There she is. She's just the happiest person in the room. She can't even sit down. Why is that? Well, we're getting to her little moment of fame in a minute here. And it's very interesting. Watch what she does afterwards, because that's the fascinating part.
Quebec Lieutenant. Thank you. Merci, John.
All right, so there's the photo op with Mark Carney, Governor General Mary Simon. Guilbeault has been chastised.
Quebec
Mr.
MP
Greenpeace
Stephen
activist.
Guilbeault assuming a brand new portfolio. One of the more significant shifts in cabinet, he moves away from environment and climate change. He's a well-known environmentalist from Quebec, I should say, who has led the file on environment and climate change and the policies pursued by the federal government, some popular, others like the carbon tax not. Mark Carney, of course, promising to get rid of the carbon tax as soon as he assumes office.
Here comes
Stevie
Chrystia
Guilbeault
Freeland's
becomes the
moment.
Minister of Canadian Culture and Identity. We'll look to find out this afternoon exactly what that means. He'll oversee Parks Canada.
She just can't wait to stand up. She's just literally squirming in her seat, bouncing around in her seat. And this is technically a demotion. She used to be the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, or Global Affairs, whatever the hell they're calling it this week. And now she's the Minister of Transport. How often do you think of the Minister of Transport? Well, when there's a train strike, when there's a major aircraft crash, you think about the Minister of Transport. But Chrystia Freeland looks like this is the best job she ever had.
Also be the government's lieutenant.
Chrystia Freeland, Ministre du Transport et du Commerce Intérieur.
There she is. And I want you to notice something here.
I, Chrystia Freeland, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Transport and Internal Trade. Moi, Chrystia Freeland.
I, Chrystia Freeland, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully and to the best of my...
Now, we're waiting here for the big hug with Mark Carney. And what she does is very interesting.
Right.
What does she whisper in Mark Carney's ear there? Did we see that? She whispers something in Mark Carney's ear. He is ecstatic about it. We're back. It's time to unfold the plan. Yeah, I've been playing the role, but she whispers something in Mark Carney's ear. I want to finish with this today. This is fascinating because what we witnessed with the swearing-in ceremony on Friday, and a lot of you probably watched it as I did it live on my program. Did you see any Roman Catholics or Protestants, or for that matter, a rabbi, even an imam, No. Clearly, this is no longer a Christian country or a Christian ceremony. It's a pagan one, because we had a pagan ceremony before everything unfolded here. But watch Mark Carney wink at the camera. Like he knows what this is going on. And I'm sick of hearing how these unceded lands. No, I'm sorry, they were ceded. We won. They're part of Canada. They're not part of any Indigenous people. They're not part of any tribe. They're not part of any First Nations. They are Canada. And they're not unceded. So get that straight.
A moment to share with you a traditional activity that was initiated just prior to the beginning of the ceremony. The lighting of the hulik, a traditional Inuit lamp. This lamp is used in the north to bring light and warmth to the home. We light the hulik to mark important events such as today's ceremony. And we are grateful for the presence of Elder Canon Iga Atikutsiak from Arctic Bay, who lit the hulik and will remain and maintain its light and warmth throughout the ceremony. Nakumik. And will remain
right there
and maintain its light and warmth.
Mark Carney winked at the camera. In other words, I know what you're thinking, but we're all in on the joke together. Now, I'm not going to go through. He looks directly at the camera and winks. I'm not going to go through this prayer from this Algonquin woman that was entirely untranslated. I have no idea what she was praying for or about. But it's clear we have a world religion now, and it's called paganism. I don't often get into faith on this program. You all know where I stand. I'm an evangelical Christian. I go to church on Sunday, and I'll be going to church in less than 45 minutes. But Mark Carney represents globalism writ large. And of course, globalism is writ large. But he represents also the particulars of globalism, one of which is a one world religion. And that one world religion is not going to be Christianity, not going to be Judaism. It's going to be paganism. And that's what Mark Carney told Canadians on Friday. Canada is no longer a Christian country. I'm not even going to have a pastor or a priest at this ceremony because they're irrelevant to Canada now. They aren't part of the globalist agenda. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is, Mark Carney is telling us. And that's the other part of Spector. If you think for a minute, Mark Carney is just a nice guy, a moderate, pure poly of light, just a little bit right of the conservative, a little bit left of the Conservative Party. That's not who he is. When I come back, some concluding remarks. Yes, please have a look at this Substack when it goes up this afternoon. I'm just finalizing it this morning. Probably get it up after I get back from church today. Read this. It's going to be part of a series. In fact, it is part of a series on who Mark Carney really is. Who is this guy? People don't know who he is. Is he going to be good for Canada? No, he's going to be good for the globalists. That's what he's there for. Mark Carney is a clear and present danger to Canadian democracy and to the United States and what Donald Trump is doing to bring back freedom of speech. Yes, I know he's got problems. I know he's not perfect, but he's moving in the right direction. And do you think Mark Carney would ever have a Doge in Canada? We need to encourage Pierre Poilievre to have a Doge and insist a conservative government have a Doge. But do you think for a minute Mark Carney wants to peel back the layers of corruption in this country? No, because they lead back to their globalist masters. Thanks for watching today, folks. I appreciate your help and your support. God bless you. Have a great Sunday. And I'll be back again tomorrow at 10. Thanks for watching. Resolve to